So, as I said, we are grateful for this invitation to the Tuesday lecture in Theosophical Society Copenhagen, and welcome to our home here in Finland. We will begin with an invocation, a mantra to set the tone of this evening that we share together, this moment. So make yourself comfortable and listen to the mantra in your heart. Allow your heart to open up and expand.
And let yourself become fully present to this moment and to your heart and to this event we are having together.
O divine force, spirit of all creation, highest personality, divine presence manifest in every living being, supreme soul, manifested as the Divine Mother and as the Divine Father, I bow in deepest reverence. Om Satchidananda Parabrahma Purushottama Paramatama Shri Bhagavati Samhita Shri Bhagavati Namaha. Satchidananda Parabrahma Purushottama Paramatama Shri Bhagavati Samhita Shri Bhagavate Namaha. Om Satchidananda Parabrahma Purushottama Paramatama Shri Bhagavati Samhita Shri Bhagavate Namaha. Hari Om Tat Sat. 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 Satchidananda Parabrahma Purushottama Paramatama Shri Bhagavati Samhita Shri Bhagavate Namaha. Om Satchidananda Parabrahma Purushottama Paramatama Shri Bhagavati Samhita Shri Bhagavate Namaha. Hari Om Tat Sat. 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 Hari Om Tat Sat, 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om Satchidananda Parabrahma Purushottama Paramatama Shri Bhagavati Samhita Shri Bhagavate Namah.
Sat, meaning being. Chit, consciousness. Ananda, bliss, love. Recognize this essence. Recognize this essence in you. We are able to recognize it. We all recognize the beingness, the core of our being. We are all aware. We are conscious. And we are able to tap into our true nature as love. So I also, for my part, want to thank very much Theosophical Society, and I don't see if Liz is here, but I think Liz has invited us, and I have met. Yeah, Liz is there. Hello. We have met many years ago in Golden Circle, where we are doing Golden Academy teaching with Askel Ransen, and so we have common history, and also welcome all our new Danish friends that we don't yet know, but very happy to see you all. And for this, even we may call it lecture, we still benefit much deeper if we allow ourselves to really settle into our hearts. And although I will share a lot of knowledge, a lot of esoteric knowledge, and going into details of terminology and cosmology, still, if you are able to not so much try to understand very much with your mind, but really settle in and listen with your heart, I'm sure these words resonate within your heart when your heart is open, because what I will be sharing, it's not my own stuff. It is traditional, very profound teachings, and of course our understandings about those teachings. And so by merely just listening like carelessly with our minds and maybe engaging doing other things while we are in a webinar, we don't really deep down benefit that much. So let us give our presence here to this event as you have chosen to be in, and we are very happy that you did so. And we will do this together. So today we will do so that I will first lay out the theoretical framework, the lecture part, and then Hans Christian will be talking a little bit about meditation practice and guiding then a meditation at the end. And in the weekend webinar, for those who like to join or those who have already signed up, we will go into more depth with the practice part and with different styles of meditation also. But today we will talk about the path of consciousness, our path as spiritual beings, our path as souls. There is this very famous popular saying, I don't actually remember who said that, but most of you have heard, that we are not human beings having spiritual experiences. We are a spiritual being having a human experience. So let's keep that in mind. Let's nourish that in our hearts when we listen to these words of teaching, these words which are meant to inspire our practice, inspire our journey. That we listen with our hearts as that spiritual being incarnated in this human body, in the divine body of consciousness itself. In non-dual teachings, it is often been said that there is no path. So this path is a pathless path. And what is meant by that is that the fundamental, ultimate reality, the non-dual nature, that we deep down are nothing but that sameness in all of us. There is no path because for that which is no beginning or no end. That always remains. It is right here, right now. And yet, we don't somehow, at least not fully, recognize it. Because we have an experience that we are individual beings, even separate beings, separate to anybody else. We experience ourselves to be different and separate. So the path is for that which feels to be individual and yet already is longing to recognize that primordial essence of love, bliss, being, consciousness, Satchidananda. So the path of consciousness, the spiritual path, is for the one who experiences itself to be veiled and yet is painfully aware of that veil and wants to reawaken or wants to recognize the essence. So I will be in this lecture combining two different elements. On one hand, applying teachings of cosmology from a tradition that is called Kashmir Shaivism, and then combining that cosmological understanding of the existence with the 7 levels of consciousness that many of you are very familiar from the Theosophy. Not only in Theosophy but also in Hinduism, they talk about 7 levels of consciousness as 7 lokas, 7 worlds of existence, 7 vibratory fields. These are universes that vibrate in a certain manner. And here I have this whiteboard. I often use whiteboard because I like to draw those 7 balls, because they explain in such amazing way so many things in this existence. They are very somehow appealing to my heart. And this system of 7 is a very old system. It's known to be used in the oldest scriptures such as Rig Veda. And we are familiar with the system of 7 both from Theosophy and also American teacher Mark Sullivan, with whom we have been fortunate to study it many years, is very much using this 7ing. So we will put these 2 frames together, teachings from Kashmir Shaivism and then teachings on the 7 levels of existence. And this time our whiteboard is beautiful woolen whiteboard made by one of our dear friends, Tanya, who is also now today present in this webinar. And Tanya has made this beautiful piece of art as a mandala for our retreat place, Heartland-Sydänmaa, where we organize meditation retreats and other courses related to meditation and yoga. And here in the middle, Tanya has been writing beautifully. It's in Finnish language, that greatest of them all is love. And it very much points to the essence of our core practices here in the Heartland. But these 7 levels, they are these different planes of consciousness, which I will explain what they are in shortly after. They are all regarded to be like an expression of that primordial nature I already referred to. This primordial nature, this non-dual nature, is none of these planes, and yet it is all of these planes of consciousness. It is like the beneath, underlying, or the core essence of all these levels. Therefore, it is not one particular level, it's kind of for all levels, and yet none of it depending from the point of view here. And this non-dual essence is called different names in different traditions. In Kashmir Shaivism, it is called Parashiva. And in Advaita Vedanta, it is called Parabrahman or Nirguna Brahman. Nirguna Brahman means actually Brahman without attributes, without qualities. So it is that core essence, underlying, fundamental, absolute essence, whereas these levels of existence, they all are part of the relative existence. They are all certain frequencies of vibration. In Sufism, they call this non-dual underlying reality as Akva. Akva means deepest mystery. In Buddhism, they call it Rigpa. And we could call it God as well, as long as we don't reduce God to some individualized being. If we more use the term God, indicating that primordial existence. So why this sevening is very appealing also to study and to discuss is that we also, as human beings, have 7 levels of consciousness, 7 chakras. So we are kind of a microcosm in the microcosmos. And although deep down our 7 chakras correlate in a microcosmic way to the macrocosmos, often when our chakras are not fully opened, it's not like we are able to, through our chakras, directly access and get absorbed into these more subtle levels of vibrations. But nevertheless, the deepest core of each chakra, also as quality, so-called rays, are representing in us the same qualities as in the microcosmic system. So Kashmir Shaivism is a non-dual tantric tradition that was born in Kashmir around 850 according to some sources. And nowadays Kashmir belongs partly to India and partly to Pakistan. It is the very northern part of India. And I will be using a particular sutras today to describe this cosmology of Kashmir Shaivism, and then reflecting that cosmology, how I understand it in the levels of sevening. These sutras are being written by a Kashmir Shaivism master who lived in 1100. Kshemaraja was his name. And the sutras are called, the name of the sutras is Heart of Recognition, Pratyabhijna Hridayam. Pratyabhijna meaning recognition, and Hridayam meaning the heart. In many traditions, non-dual traditions, such as Kashmir Shaivism, but also Advaita Vedanta, also in Buddhism, the word heart is being written by capital H. And heart does not mean like an anahata chakra, like heart center, heart chakra, but it means the more fundamental center. It refers to the word center. It means the very essence of consciousness itself. So it refers to that non-dual reality. And we can see a heart chakra, though, as an important portal, gateway, one of the gateways in our path to recognize this underlying fundamental essence, core essence. Recognition is a very important word that they use in Kashmir Shaivism. Recognize means in this context realize, same as self-realization. They talk about recognition. And this recognition is a gradual process. So in this Sutras of Heart of Recognition, I shall start by reading a couple of them to explain how this universe came about. And then we will take a look of this, how it fits with these 7 levels of consciousness. And I will introduce these 7 levels of consciousness, what they are by names. And then we will go into what do they really mean, what is the quality in these different levels. So starting by Sutra 1, it says that autonomous consciousness is the source of the entire universe. So everything manifests out of that consciousness, and everything is being withdrawn back to itself. This is also called pralaya, the withdrawal. So it is the one fundamental autonomous consciousness, which is the source. It's the consciousness itself which is the source of the entire universe. And I love to use the word consciousness here because it's a very neutral term and it's very much to the point. We don't need to engage religious language here necessarily. So we could say that out of Brahman or out of God, the whole universe becomes. Or that the Brahman or God is the source of that whole universe, whole creation, whole manifestation. But I like the word consciousness because everybody can recognize and use that, no matter if they are religious or not religious, if they belong to one tradition or to another. Then Sutra 2 talks about why all this. So, of its own free will, that consciousness unfolds the universe on the screen of itself. So here it says that the whole universe is reflection of that one consciousness, is nothing but that. So all of us in individual level, everything is nothing but the light of that consciousness itself, reflection of that consciousness. And there's another word I wanted to say, representation of that consciousness, also in individual level. Then we have Sutra 7 here in this context, which leads us now to talk about these different levels of consciousness. And the Supreme Consciousness is one, is dual, is threefold, is fourfold, and consists of 7 sets of 5. So here we start. Already going into there. 1, 2, 3, fourfold. And 7 sets of 5 is a particular expression in Kashmir Shaivism because they have a different system. They are talking about 35 plus 1, so here 7 sets of 5 makes 35, and 35 plus 1 makes 36. They talk about 36 tattvas, and tattvas are understood as elements, so it's very much we're talking about the same thing here. Then we talk about the 7 system of 7, but Kashmir Shaivism just goes into much more details nevertheless, I will be using this system of 7, which makes sense to many of us who are familiar with that set of teaching. So, if you are not familiar with the names of these 7 planes of consciousness, do not worry at all, because it's not like you have to try to remember the names now. I know many of you already remember them, but there are always new people with us, which we're very happy about. So I will say the names first, and then we will look what is the primordial essence of these levels. So in Theosophy we are used with the certain names of these levels. And starting from the top, the first level is called Adi, which means the first. It's the primordial to the others. And then we have a so-called monadic level, atmic level, and we will elaborate this more, Buddhic level in the middle, then mental, which is in this context of teaching often discussed as divided to the higher mental and lower mental plane of consciousness. And then we have a astral, emotional level, and the physical, etheric level. And in the Hindu system of 7 lokas, they are called Satya loka. Satya means the truth. And then we have Tapa loka. Then we have Jnana yoga. No, loka. Jnana loka. Because we also have Jnana yoga. Jnana yoga is the yoga of wisdom and yoga of knowledge. So it's the same word as jnana in this loka. Then Mahar loka, Shwar loka, Bhuvar loka, and Pur loka. Then before going to look more closely about these lokas, about these planes of consciousness, I will give you now the key words that we will be then carried on throughout this whole lecture or talk, sharing. And the key words here are will, knowledge, and action. It's a trinity, sacred trinity of will, knowledge, and action. In Kashmir Shaivism, they talk about Icha, will, Jnana, knowledge, and Kriya, action. So this trinity, it's known in many other different traditions as well. Even in Theosophy, they may use a slightly different terminology also sometimes, but nevertheless, it means pretty much the same. And there are, in the system of 7, there are 3 sets of trinities in this system. So there is uppermost trinity of will, knowledge, and action here in this level. And then the next level, action turns into will to the next level, to the level below. So we have here will, knowledge, and action. And then one more set, we have will, knowledge, and action here. And in Theosophy, these triangles are often described as the uppermost triangle is called the spirit or the monad. And then the next triangle, the middle triangle, is often referred as the soul. And then the most densely vibrating triangle, the lowest triangle here, it is something that is called the personality. So here the trinity in the middle, the soul, it is from atmic, Buddhic to higher mental. And we will talk about what that higher mental exactly means later. And then the personality or the planes where we are mostly starting to identify with our physical, emotional, mental vehicles. It is where also we start experiencing this sense of separate self. And this is why these planes, or this lowest trinity, is also called the trinity, the triangle, no, trinity of the ego. And before we go there, it is very useful to use again something we dwell from Kashmir Shaivism. In Kashmir Shaivism, it is being taught that the consciousness itself performs a fivefold act. And the fivefold act are the act of creation, so manifestation, and the act of maintenance, so maintaining the creation, and then destruction, act of destruction, meaning the withdrawal of the creation, of the manifestation back to its source. This is also called pralaya. Also in Theosophy, this term of pralaya is very much used similarly way, and many other traditions. But destruction also refers to transformation. It is when something is being renewed, something is being transformed. That also has to do with the aspect of destruction. And then the fourth act is being called concealment, veiling. So the very primordial consciousness, the one, starts veiling itself, conceals itself, and then hides itself from itself. And this is the situation, human situation, where we experience to be different, separated, individualized, because of that very act of veiling, concealment. That very act of concealment enables this individual experience. So it's part of that which can be called involution. Individualization is not possible. The experience of individualization is not possible without the veiling. So all these levels of consciousness here, these 7 lokas, they are all veiled in the most subtle aspect. The highest vibrating veiling is so thin that there is almost no veil. There is just slight sense of individuality, which totally still rests in one non-dual nature. And then the veiling gets a little more, each plane, little more thick, and little more thick, and little more thick. And then the last act of consciousness is then the act of revelation, where the consciousness is revealing itself, to us, who are nothing but that. And this revelation is often be called also in Kashmir Shaivism grace, anugraha, grace. It's very beautiful. It's very beautiful for us to not be mental about this, but take it to your heart, truly. That the act of grace comes from your own, very own consciousness. We are often invoking grace from enlightened beings, such as masters or archangelic or angelic beings of light and love, or some God-like beings, logoses. But actually, when we do that, what happens in real is that we are activating the grace of our own very consciousness. So the job of a guru, for example, to a student is to activate and ignite that grace within the very own consciousness of the student. And deep down, of course, because there is only one consciousness, there is no difference between the grace of the master and the grace of one's own consciousness. The self is always one, the self, the ultimate self, or the fundamental self nature. And it is often, when we don't recognize it in us, it is easier to recognize it in those who have already recognized it in themselves. They are also, because of that, they are vibrating also in a very different frequency than the one who has not recognized it. And therefore this whole entire universe works also so that there are beings who are constantly supporting those other beings who are not fully awakened yet to their own primordial nature. And this is why we invoke grace also. And that amazing grace is available for us, both from beings who deep down are no other than our very own consciousness, expressions of the one consciousness. But this is very beautiful to understand what the grace really means, that it is there all the time, accessible. So in the process of concealment, veiling, what precisely happens is that the consciousness loses its self-consciousness, so self-awareness, consciousness of its primordial essence. Because when it gets veiled, it starts identifying itself with the objective world of existence, and therefore its subjectivity becomes objectified, it becomes narrowed down, apparently it becomes limited. In the ultimate sense, this doesn't happen, but in the relative level of experience, it very much is so. So then what happens is that when the consciousness starts identifying itself, for example, in the physical, identifying with the physical body and with the astral emotional body and with the mental body, and not only with that, but also everything it has projected out and created itself as the individualized mind, all different beliefs, thoughts about ourselves, our limited perspectives, our painful experiences, everything that we have created, what kind of a person we think we are, and all these kind of a narrowed down versions, attributes that we have built it through our own projection of our mind. And this whole field becomes this narrowed subjectivity, where we identify ourselves also with our own stories about ourselves. So this is very key actually in Kashmir Shaivism, how they explain the whole system of duality, why we experience duality. It all has to do with this subjectivity and objectivity. And I will read a sutra here. that describes it. So it says that the consciousness, meaning the autonomous one consciousness, is diversified by multiplying into reciprocal subjects and objects. So it multiplies. One consciousness becomes many when incarnating, when manifesting. And it creates this veil of illusion. And because of this, the subjectivity gets limited. And we start experiencing ourselves still. We experience still ourselves as subject, but now we are individualized to the level of we feel to be separate subjects, and everything else we see and perceive we see as objects, and therefore the duality we feel to be I and you are you, and this whole play of consciousness between the subject and object starts. And it also relates very much to the then very level of awakening. It will be also this interplay with the subject and objects. I will talk about it a little later. But here, I think it's so vital to understand what this subjectivity and objectivity really means. It's very crucial in Kashmir Shaivism. So when we look at this sevenings, we can understand that these uppermost elements in Kashmir Shaivism, tattvas, the highest most tattvas, they are called levels of subjectivity, whereas the more densely vibrating tattvas, they are called the levels of objectivity. And what it exactly means now, once more, so that you will actually understand it and remember it, that subjectivity refers to levels where we retain our self-awareness as spiritual beings, self-awareness of our true essence as the very consciousness. So where we're able to recognize it. And when we start incarnating to the more denser levels, the objects of our perception start become dominant. So we lose the subjectivity, the primordial subjectivity as that pure consciousness, because we start identifying with the vibration, with the energy aspect that is called also prakriti, nature aspect, vibration aspect. And in the human level, we identify with this humanness. So the ego is nothing else but that portion of consciousness which identifies itself with the bodies, with the physical body, with the astral body, and with the mental body. So in these more densely vibrating fields, it is simply more difficult to retain that self-awareness. But this is exactly the spiritual practice. We practice to become self-aware in all these levels of existence. We practice to regain our self-awareness as that primordial consciousness. This is what the awakening is all about. And in Buddhism, they call these uppermost levels the planes of the mind levels. This is also what we have learned from our teacher Mark Sullivan, who uses in this context, the Buddhist context, to talk about mind elements. And then these other elements are called form elements. Form. And sometimes the heart is being included in this talk about form element, because it is kind of already a subtle form. It is our like a soul body, bliss, love body. We will go into that shortly. Sometimes it is being called described as being this intermediate level that kind of brings and synthesizes the mind elements and form elements. So it's a synthesis. So it's part of the form elements, and it's partly part of the mind elements. Here we should also introduce important factors when we talk about prakriti, the nature aspect, the vibration, the manifestation, the creation. In very many different traditions, they use the terms gunas. Gunas, there are 3 gunas, and gunas are like modes of consciousness or existence. They are like different frequencies of vibration. They are being born, tattva, and they are being born out of prakriti. Gunas are different frequencies of prakriti. And these 3 gunas are called sattvic, sattva guna, which refers to harmonious, self-conscious aspect, self-conscious vibration, harmonious vibration, tranquility, also qualities such as love and peace, and all harmoniously vibrating qualities are sattvic qualities. And then rajasic qualities, rajas, is what is being called movement. It is that movement that can be both in relation to sattvic, but it also in relation to something that is being called tamas, inertia. In Theosophy, they use terms, sattva is like that, what they call rhythm, and rajas is the movement, and tamas is being called inertia. So it is the very, very primordial mode of existence that everything has these 3 gunas all the time in different portions, depending on which guna is predominating over the other 2 gunas, or how they are predominating each other. Then it defines the level of vibration in us and in the whole cosmos. So we can naturally then see already that when we talk about more subtle levels of consciousness, the sattva is more predominant. There is a rhythm. Rhythm also has to do with the aspect of will itself. And then when we go towards the more denser vibrations in our cosmos, in the universe, and in our own system, that's starting from the lower mind, then rajasic quality starts being predominant. And rajas, when it's in relation to identify itself, when we identify as consciousness ourselves with the body and with our minds and with our emotions, then rajas is kind of a restless quality. It's the very quality which brings us away from the center constantly to the periphery, which makes us feel too restless so that we can't sit down and meditate. And we want to preoccupy our minds constantly with the objects, with the other objects, than actually practice to remain as the subject in the middle, in the center. And then tamasic quality. So rajas is very much also predominant in the level of our emotional astral body, and it also starts being entangled and together with tamasic quality. of inertia, which our physical body is a per se tamasic. It's a stable nature, where when we are in physical matter, it's very difficult to remain self-aware, because the vibration gets so dense so that we easily lose our primordial subjectivity. It becomes objectified and limited, and then we start really experiencing ourselves as very separate beings from everybody else. So whole our spiritual growth has to do very much with this with these three gunas, which is predominant. When we start spiritual awakening and spiritual practice, we can also consciously make choices that we make this sattvic quality much more predominant in our lives, in our minds, in our whole system, in our body, by supporting certain kind of livelihood and lifestyle, starting with even with the things we eat and the way we are and express ourselves. Because it's been taught that the gunas are not our ultimate nature, they are the relative nature. But nevertheless, when we are experiencing and manifesting sattvic nature more, becoming more predominant in our system, it is much easier for us to recognize our true nature, because sattvic energy is a force like centripetal force, which is bringing us to the center. And rajasic and tamasic forces are centrifugal forces. They are constantly seeking to looking out from the center. This is very beautifully described by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, talking about these two sets of forces, centripetal and centrifugal forces. But these forces shouldn't be misunderstood. Often I notice when I study about these things that tamas is described as this evil, dark, destructive quality. But what is evil really here? It is nothing but ignorance, it's self-forgetfulness. It's when the subjectivity, the self-awareness in the spiritual sense is being apparently lost and gets dormant, latent. It's then very natural that when we experience ourselves as separate, we also start experiencing that there is this naturally built dissatisfaction in us, because deep down we all yearn all the time the primordial nature, our own very nature as love and bliss. And when we don't experience that, we start grasping all the wantings we project outside. And this is very much the tamas, why it's described to be this greedy and selfish quality. Of course, it's natural. When we don't get it from inside, we try to get it from outside. And we start even competing with others. We want even more than somebody else because we need it so badly. So it's important to open up these terms also to a language where we don't use a judgmental language, but we actually talk things as they are, as they're meant to be. Now we will go and take a look-see then in these 7 levels of consciousness, and looking, when we start to talk about the 3 uppermost levels, we introduce the terminology used in Kashmir Shaivism that is very articulative about this. And for us who love details, it is very nourishing to understand more precisely how these levels function, what is their role in the universe. And there we will introduce that which Kashmir Shaivism teachings talk about subjectivity. There in this third level, something that we can call pure subject, and then one more up is pure subject, and the first level from the up is called purest subject, purest subjectivity, or purest subject. So this first Adi level, or Satya Loka, in Kashmir Shaivism, the purest subject is the universal I, is the primordial I, is the very consciousness itself that recognizes to be the primordial subject. So that universal I in Kashmir Shaivism, it is described always to be a combination of Shiva and Shakti. So this first level is being, there are two tattvas which are called Shiva tattva and Shakti tattva. And it's very beautifully described how the Shiva here means the light of consciousness, and the Shakti here means the power of self-awareness. It is the awareness of that light. And in Kashmir Shaivism and also in other traditions, in many tantric traditions, this is similar, because it is said that Shiva without Shakti is as good as death, which means that the light of consciousness needs the power of self-awareness to be self-aware. So these Shiva and Shakti are always together, married, inherently married in tantric traditions, tantric non-dual traditions. So another terminology here, what is used in many other traditions, also in Kashmir Shaivism, is to talk about prakasha and vimarsha. So prakasha means Shiva, the light of consciousness, and vimarsha means Shakti, that power of self-awareness, awareness of that light. So the whole idea about the manifestation in this teaching is that it is the very light of consciousness that becomes the whole of manifestation. So none of us is nothing but that. And then the vimarsha aspect becomes this individualized aspect, that we are in individual level representation of that one consciousness in individual level. That vimarsha also becomes then the reflection. And this level, it's just pure I, aham, I am. Nothing else is there. There is absolutely no sense of individuality in the way that it would be separate from anything else. There is only one if there is individuality, it's the one individuality, which is, there's nothing but that. Then the next level, this level has to do with the will now, when we start these trinities. So this I is the same as many traditions talk about being, pure being, I, being. It has an active aspect. That aspect is will. So in order to the manifestation to arise, there has to be primordial will. Nothing starts moving without the will. So will has to be inherently there, right from the beginning. This is also like first ray is being explained as a will. We don't go to ray teachings quite yet here, but in the weekend webinar we can talk more about those as well, and we will. So then the next level, which starts, we start going to this level of knowledge, knowing, the monadic level. The monad is kind of a seed, only a seed of individualization. The monad becomes then individualized as Atman, as the soul, which the soul is also, or Atman is no different than Brahman, but it's already a subtle individualization we're talking about here. But the monadic level is like an idea in the universal mind. So this, which is called pure subjectivity, pure subject, it again divides itself into two different aspects that are called Sada Shiva Tattva and Ishvara Tattva. And Sada Shiva Tattva means as a name, it refers to knowledge, whereas Ishvara Tattva refers to action. So in this level, the consciousness has this capacity to both identify with self, identify itself with itself. And this is the aspect of aham, I am that. So this level, the second level, the consciousness still rests as that aham. But then comes and that happens, that's Sada Shiva Tattva. And then the aspect of where the will, the Kriya, starts already being there in the second level. Otherwise, no universe can be born. If that doesn't start, if the consciousness doesn't already start turning and start projecting out from its own very core, the manifestation. And this is called, Ishvara Tattva is being called, referred as aham idam. And that means I am this. So you see, I am that. As long as there is I am that only, there is no universe, there is no manifestation, because there is only that. The consciousness needs movement. I am this. I am this meaning already starting to indicate giving birth to the manifestation. So there needs to be an activity. So already in this level, even the knowledge, knowing, is still predominant. There starts being a subtle level of action, kriya, as the seed of that gives birth to the next level. And here we should understand knowledge, right? It doesn't mean, of course, the knowledge that we read from books and that we remember and understand as knowledge in the physical level, but it is more a direct knowing, direct recognition, which very much relates to awareness itself, to know itself. This is what the knowing is in this level. And this is the deepest, most aspect of jnana yoga as well. Jnana yoga, the knowledge, yoga of knowledge and wisdom. It's when we practice it, we learn and study a lot of also theoretical knowledge, which acts as a stimulation and pointer towards the right direction. But the real knowledge in the ultimate sense is not at all what we learn from books or theories, but it is the direct perception. This is what knowledge stands in this triangle. And then this level, or the second level, purer subjectivity. Then the next level of subjectivity is opening up. And this is called Suddha Tattva. And this is the place where this I am that aham and I am this idam, they start being in equilibrium. So whereas in the second level, there is still a predominance. It's a leaning towards aham. So in this next level or third level, the kriya aspect, the action aspect starts becoming more predominant. So that it's when the both are still there in equilibrium, it means that in the level of Atma, our first kind of a slightly veiled nature, we still totally recognize and rest. We still rest as that primordial consciousness. But at the same time, there starts being an individualization and a movement which then gives birth to the rest of the manifestation. And this is often called also a level of sound. So different teachings are teaching that the whole manifestation is actually consisting of light and sound. So this level of sound is something that in Bible is being referred, that in the beginning there was the Word, and Word was with God, and the Word was God. And out of that, then the creation comes forth. So here in the throat, in the deepest aspect of our throat, so to say, we could say, that this is where we also hear we can connect to a primordial sound as something that is called nada. It's the primordial vibration. It's the inner vibration. In nada yoga, we are starting to listen to the inner frequency of vibration that we can actually hear within, but it is not a sound that is produced from outside. And we have different frequencies of vibration in our whole system. We can start hearing different chakras are vibrating different levels of sounds. So out of that, the universe is being born. Now we are in the level of, we have given birth to Atman, or Atmic level. But the consciousness still wants to move on. Now the level of Atman becomes this level of will, a level to will to manifest. And then in the next trinity, this will to manifest, then the heart or the Buddhic level becomes the knowing aspect. And then the mental becomes the action aspect when we talk about will, knowledge, and action. I should remember to say also that in Kashmir Shaivism, they use the term spanda, meaning vibration. It's very much used in this context of kriya, action. Also, in Theosophy, we use the term active intelligence, that vibration, out of which the primordial substance of the universe, out of which everything is made of. Spanda is vibration. So here we were talking about the next trinity then, that what does it mean that the Buddhic level becomes the level of knowing? What is knowing in the Buddhic level? It is intuition. Here the knowing is direct perception, direct recognition. But here in the heart, or in the Buddhic level, the knowing is intuition. And intuition is like in a way, it's a pre-state to a direct knowing. Intuition actually, when we refine our intuition, it leads to direct perception. But intuition is connected to feeling. It's like highest most feeling. It is that very sattvic feeling. Intuition is conscious feeling. It is not this kind of what we often think of as intuition, as we often talk about intuition in a much different sense in a human level, which is more like pure feeling, like I feel this is right, so I do like this. In this context, intuition may mean something much deeper. It is the intermediate bit between the direct true knowing and then sensing that knowing, intuiting to that knowledge. So for example, we start experiencing our primordial nature often first like feeling it, intuiting to it. We start recognizing, even when we are not able to fully absorb to it, maybe yet, we start feeling it. It's feeling as this underlying current, frequency, essence. And also the Buddhic level, what the knowledge is, and the knowing aspect, it is something that we can call love. So as Jesus talks about very much love as the way. So love becomes the way. This, when we start talking about the Buddhic level, also in yogic traditions, it is often called as Anandamaya Kosha, which means Ananda, bliss. And Kosha means the body, or at the same time it's also veiling. But Anandamaya Kosha is like this soul body where we're experiencing love and bliss. But it's yet still a slight individuality. And that's why in yogic traditions it's been still called that is a veiling. It's not quite the same as our primordial nature. Well, it is expression of that. But if we regard our primordial nature as being something underlying, something beneath, something which is not the same as, it's not limited to the particular level of existence, such as not the level of Buddhic or Anandamaya Kosha. And here in this level, Shakti and Shiva, they are again there still in a different kind of equilibrium, where we could say that there is still self-awareness in a way of experience as oneness, Love is something that there's no boundaries in a way. Love breaks the boundaries. When we really start loving, we start uniting. So we can say this is the level of unification as love, the level of oneness. So there has to be self-recognition, some awakened subjectivity in order to experience this level. When we start our meditation practice, we have to become quite much self-aware and be able to silence, or at least not identify it with the playing of the mind taking us away with the stories. We have to create enough stillness, enough centeredness, enough consciousness, self-awareness that we start tapping in, we start experiencing our nature as love and bliss, as oneness. So therefore I said that there is still Shiva aspect also there, but the Shakti aspect is more the vibrational aspect, nature aspect as love, as vibration. And this vibration is something that we can feel, so we can use our sense of feeling. It is a very subtle feeling though. Then this love continues, the consciousness continues even further. It doesn't seem to be satisfied that it has managed to create now the firstborn, Atman, but it still wants to go even more dense, more deep in the process of individualization. And this is when the next level comes to picture. And the next level of action. So whereas here it was the Atman that was the firstborn, here we have then the secondborn, so to say. And this is where the individuality, the separate self, really kicks in our experience. So first of all, I mentioned already earlier that we have to distinguish between higher mental and lower mental when we talk about this in order to understand it better. So higher mental is that aspect which is called the mind of discernment and discrimination. Also in Kashmir Shaivism and other traditions as well use the term buddhi. It's not quite the same as buddhic. It clearly refers to something that in Theosophy is being called to be higher mind, mind of discrimination, mind of discernment. This higher aspect is something which turns very, very vital in our spiritual practice. And we will look at a couple of sutras to demonstrate this soon. But then this higher mind, it's where we are able to feel, experience that subjectivity which is not totally objectified and totally limiting to itself from itself, like in a lower mind, which is sensorial mind, and which is lower mind is where something that Kashmir Shaivism call ahamkara, also other traditions do it, which means the ego, the sense of separate self is experienced. This is the part of the mind which is restless by nature, creating objects constantly, keeping those objects on and then dissolving and creating new objects, and in constantly a very active process of creation. But it's so active that it loses the subjectivity is very easily lost. But it is in the higher mind where we find ourselves as this this I again. So even it's now the veiled version of the primordial I, which we talked here, the primordial I, which still the Atman, Atmic level, it's the consciousness recognizes itself as this primordial I. But now in the level of the higher mind, we can experience the one who is conscious, the one who is aware. And this is why the higher mind is now very crucial in our spiritual practice. And it's very accessible. We actually cannot really fully start recognizing these more subtle levels of consciousness unless we are able to recognize that higher mind aspect, that aspect of ourselves which is able to be, to witness the phenomena, to witness the objects of our consciousness, and learn to recognize and rest as that subject. So our spiritual practice is to silence the waves of the mind to the extent that we start being able to recognize the one who is and who is aware. And this very recognition then finally culminates to the recognition of our ultimate subject. So the witnessing, the real witness, the Atman itself, is also being called Turiya, this primordial I, which still is, even it's recognizing its own nature, it still has some duality left to be able to witness and recognize the object of the perception and not getting entangled and identified with the object, such as thoughts and ideas and stories, etc. So this is why the higher mind is now very vital in our spiritual journey path, when we then start opening up to this deeper level of existence. So the concrete mind, I already mentioned, the lower mind is the sensorial mind, and it is that logical thinking mind. It is this same very mind where we start feeling us as separate beings. And now I should introduce a couple of more sutras again, so that we understand what the sutras say exactly about this thing. So the Sutra 4 says, even individuated consciousness, whose essence is consciousness, the capital C, the consciousness, in a contracted state, is a contracted form of the universe. So it says here that even when the consciousness is individuated, its essence is the same. Nevertheless, it is no other than the primordial consciousness. But it's just in contracted state. So it is the contracted form of the universe, this microcosmos. And then Sutra 5 says that unlimited consciousness, having further descended from the state of individual consciousness, when embodied and contracted in object of perception, becomes the mind. So here we can see that the very consciousness, when it becomes contracted, and it also starts getting objectified, as I explained, it becomes narrowed subjectivity, because it starts identifying with the objects of perception. that becomes something that we can call the lower mind. And about the lower mind, it says here, one whose nature is that of mind perceives Maya, the illusion of separateness. Maya is a term, the apparent illusion. Prakriti is also related to that concept. And the Maya is the same veiling, the whole totality of the veiling, the whole process of veiling that enables this individual experience. But paradoxically, we have to awaken as consciousness, not to get entangled and identified with the nature, with Maya. And this is where Purusha, the term Purusha, comes into play. In many traditions, Purusha are simply just used as referring the spirit, whereas Prakriti is the nature. So Purusha is often described as this ultimate, in the ultimate sense, as the very consciousness itself in the ground level or highest level, or however you want to put it. But in Kashmir Shaivism, it's interestingly, Purusha is more described as this soul aspect, the intermediate aspect, that very much to me relates to something that we call higher mind. Also, higher mind is called Vijnana Maya Kosha, by the way. Vijnana means discrimination, discernment. And in our spiritual awakening process, that Purusha, exactly that conscious I, which I said, which is the very same as now when you listen to my talk, you are aware what has been said, you are aware that you are sitting there, you are aware that you exist. Therefore, you are aware that you have a free choice and free will to sit there and to change your life, if you so wish, towards spiritual awakening. So that is the Purusha aspect. And here also Vimarsha has something to play with, because, or it has something to do with this, because remember I mentioned that Vimarsha is that power of self-awareness. And that very power, it wants to wake up. It is this nature is to first get veiling and then to reawaken to its own core. So when we start exercising our will, and here we talk about the Trinity, how this mind then becomes the next level of will. So when we start exercising our will to wake up and apply knowledge and then do the right things, we strengthen this, we waken up this Purusha aspect, that the Purusha has to become predominant, and so that it doesn't lose itself to Prakriti, nature, who brings us all directions, entangled with the objects constantly. What I wanted to say about Vimarsha is that because there is this built-in willingness, yearn, thirst to awaken in us, to self-recognize, so the whole universe is supporting us. We are never alone when we start a spiritual journey, because it's the nature of awakened part of the universe is to reawaken itself, wanting to awaken itself in itself. So this is a wonderful power of when we establish our will to sit down and practice and start changing our lifestyle to that direction. There is enormous grace is following. Did I read already Sutra 13? No. And this is important to understand about the higher mind. I said that the higher mind here plays this crucial role. And now you should understand that higher mind, we are not meaning something higher out there. It means simply the conscious mind. The mind who is self-conscious. Right now, right here, we are able to tap to that higher mind. When we are silencing ourselves even for few fragments of seconds from being constantly entangled and identified with the objects. So Sutra 13 says that the state of a transmigratory individual is that of being deceived by one's own powers while failing to recognize that. So this was actually a Sutra 12 I read accidentally. I wanted to read Sutra 13, but nevertheless this Sutra 12 also points out the very important thing, that the state of a transmigratory individual is that of being deceived by one's own powers while failing to recognize that, meaning the consciousness. So we are deceived by Prakriti constantly. We are deceived by gunas, Rajaguna and Tamas guna, Tamaguna, Tamas and Rajas, because they are deceiving us if we are not self-aware. And suddenly we are making unconscious choices all the time based on our desires, instead of making conscious choices that we actually want. See, often in your life, you actually say, I want to be healthy, I want to eat healthy, and I want to exercise, and then actually I also want to meditate. And then you just notice suddenly after a few weeks from your decision that you start slipping easily to your own patterns of diet, and or maybe choosing sofa instead of going for walk. So this is the deceivement of Prakriti, and that's why we need that will aspect, that Purusha aspect, that conscious aspect who makes choices. But then the Sutra 13. When one realizes that consciousness, the mind itself, by turning within, meditating, and by rising out of the state of limited consciousness, becomes unlimited consciousness. So here we have amazing key to understand that the mind is no other than the consciousness itself. Ramana Maharshi, an Advaita Vedanta teacher who has passed away, maybe somewhere in 80s, a very famous Indian teacher, a master, great master. He's saying that when mind is turned outward, that's ego. When mind turns inward, that's the self. So the mind here means clearly the higher mind. That when we sit still and remain self-aware, so we withdraw the attention from the objects to the center, to the consciousness itself, we start recognizing that we were never anything else than the Supreme Consciousness itself. Chitta Vritti Nirodha in Yoga Sutras, Patanjali Yoga Sutras, it's being used, this terminology. And that means that yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. So when the fluctuations, the constant waves, are calmed down, we are able to recognize ourselves as that consciousness. But then we still move on in the universal manifestation. And the next level becomes then the level, if the mind then becomes the level where the will is being exercised. It's also, by the way, should remember to say that the will of the lower mind, so-called ego will, it's actually consisting of many, many different desires. It's not a one will. It's just simply basic will is to satisfy oneself as as this separate being. So it's that separate being starts controlling and manipulating, wanting to change the world outside so that it could be happy. So that's why this lower mind has to do a lot of with the control aspect also. But actually, when we start looking our lives, we notice that the mind is full of different desires. We want this and we want that and we want more this and less of that. So it's difficult to grasp something as one will there, like conscious will. It's just a will of these little forces, so-called elementals in us, that are the lower mind is consisting of a bunch of different wills. But they all related to that neediness, because we feel that we are separate. We feel needy. But nevertheless, we have to exercise that conscious will to do what we actually want to do, instead of giving in to be deceived by these lower wills, so to say. And the next level here is called Swadhisthana chakra, and emotional level or astral level. Swadhisthana means her true abode. So abode of the Shakti. And what it really means here, so first of all, this is the level of desire. And this level desires per nature. It's connected to water element also. And when the manifestation is still not quite ready yet, there's one more level to be given birth to. This Swadhisthana, this level becomes the birth giver. It desires to give birth to its ultimate form, that baby, that beautiful physical etheric baby, which is then very much feels to be separated and individual. But it's different also from everybody else. Like, look at the snowflakes, they are each beautifully different from each other. And this is very much the Leela, the play of creation, to seeing all these different looking aspects of itself, admiring. So this level of desire wants to give birth. It wants to reproduce. It's also the level of desire. We desire all kinds of objects to make us satisfied. When we don't recognize our true nature, we feel in this level constant dissatisfaction and yearning that we then try to fill. But this is not the whole story. Also, this astral level is divided into levels of higher astral and lower astral. So that the higher astral actually is where the knowledge aspect starts playing here as vibration of aspiration and devotion. So here in the heart, it was knowledge as intuition, as love. And here it is the knowledge and the knowledge as the vibration of devotion and aspiration, which we very much need in our spiritual awakening. We feel it in the heart as longing. We feel as longing for the divine. We are longing for something. If we don't know what we are longing, we often just experience it's like dissatisfaction. It's called dukkha, also in Buddhism. This basic dissatisfaction that nothing here is satisfying me deep down, really. And unless we act according to that knowledge, which tells us to act, then we feel more and more dissatisfied, more and more desperate. Only when we start recognizing that what is it that we actually have to do here, and then we start implementing it. By starting implementing it in action, for example, taking out the meditation practice, therefore changing our vibration, changing this level into more sattvic qualities of devotion and aspiration, then the meditation also becomes very fruitful and very happy. It's not like we anymore at all need to push ourselves to meditate when this devotion and aspiration is being born in us. It's because then we want to meditate. It becomes so wet, it becomes so loving, and we feel very much touched in our hearts. So this is why this devotional aspect or aspirational aspect is also called bhakti yoga, yoga of devotion and love. So there we are experiencing also love in this level. But the difference is to the Buddhic, that in the Buddhic you are already recognizing that you are that love. So you are not yearning it. Therefore you become more like you are able to share that love. You become a cup which is full, that outpours it for others. Whereas in the level of Swadhisthana chakra, or even in the higher astral, love is more still wanting that love, that divine love. That's what devotion and aspiration, because you yearn it, you're still thirsty. So then we're coming to our densest most vibration, the physical, etheric level. Etheric is just a etheric counterpart of the physical. It is also, etheric is called pranamaya kosha. It's a prana, body of prana, vital force. Without that vital force, our physical body is not even alive, it's not even existing. So this is the culmination of really individualized being, which very much experiences itself as individual and different from others, and therefore it experiences itself as a doer. It has to act. So it becomes the last level of action. And in the spiritual sense, what is the right action is something is called karma yoga, yoga of action. It means that we start consciously. Everything that we do consciously. We are mindful of what we are doing, and we give love to everything that we are doing, so that the doing is not taking us away from the center, but doing becomes the expression of our primordial nature. So this is very much the practice of karma yoga, yoga of service, it's also been called. And here it is now finally, when this consciousness has been manifesting, has been created to the densest most level. That's why it goes into dormancy, in latency, latent latency. So the very consciousness is also called Kundalini Shakti, when emphasizing its energy aspect. So then Kundalini Shakti is known to go into dormancy, into the bottom of our root center. It's been described as a coiled snake being coiled there. So then we just live our lives as totally individualized, separate beings with all the joys and troubles that come with that level of expression, until the moment comes that our Kundalini starts awakening again. And this is often happens that either it happens spontaneously, somehow it is like the will turns into action, the primordial essence starts, or the consciousness starts awakening itself. It can happen that way. But often also it happens the way that we start experiencing this, what I called dukkha, or dissatisfaction or longing. And then we start acting according to that longing. So we, for example, start spiritual practice or conscious lifestyle, which then activates this energy. And we will much more talk about the awakening of Kundalini in our weekend webinar. But now, just to say that in order to enhance a mature awakening, we need to implement this will, knowledge, and action all the time in our spiritual awakening, so that this kind of a initial awakening that can happen in us, if we don't do anything about it, it goes back to dormancy again. Many of you recognize that at some point of your life you may have had this initial awakening, and it feels like everything is amazing, you don't need to practice even. But then if you don't keep up the practice, it starts fading away, this initial experience. And this is where we need, again, that, what I explained, will and knowledge. And knowledge here means also the theoretical knowledge about the practice. We have to know what we are doing and how we are doing it, right? And all this theoretical knowledge also supports enormously our practice. But then ultimately we have to apply the knowledge, the true knowing in these levels. So what is very helpful for us is that we implement our aspiration, our devotion. We listen to the yearning of the heart and we start acting accordingly. And this very much relates to the consciousness, self-awareness, self-recognition. So they go hand in hand. When we start acting, when we start knowing and acting, we start also awakening to this uppermost. We are starting to prepare these uppermost chakras to awaken so that Kundalini can pierce all the way. So knowing in all the level, knowledge, devotion, aspiration, opens up to deeper love and intuition, opening up to the direct perception. And then the same goes with the will. When we implement our will, conscious will, to do the practice, we start aligning with the surrender aspect. Surrender aspect also relates very much to our throat in the deeper sense. So will and surrender go very much hand in hand in a spiritual path, because we start surrendering those lower wills and desires that takes us away from the practice, and we kind of start sacrificing our time in our life and dedicate to the practice. That's when our will start being united with the higher will. So we are again preparing the way for the Kundalini to ascend. And then the same goes with action. Action means also the right lifestyle, right livelihood, which supports our practice in all the ways. So the whole idea is to, as I mentioned, to make the whole system more sattvic, so that it's simply easier for us to reawaken. And slowly and gradually, when our Kundalini awakens, we start recognizing again our true essence. And we recognize that, wow, we were never really separate. Whew, what a relief. Brings us so much happiness to our lives when we don't have to constantly be so anxious and so worried and planning and constantly feeling so that we are so separate and have to be in control of everything, and we start relaxing. This is very much what this is doing to us. This spiritual practice is the fruits of it, is that we simply become happy, because happiness starts pouring from the heart. So nobody is forcing us to do that, except our own consciousness may try to guide this personality to the point where it kind of has to wake up. But the best is when we want it naturally, when it happens naturally. Then we don't have to fight against these forces, but we have to understand that they are very powerful deceiving forces, Rajas and Tamas. We have number of excuses all the time to be engaged. Look at your life, how much time in the day you dedicate by being self-aware, and how much time goes to paying attention to all objects of perception the whole day through. So even if you dedicate a little bit time, then already miracles can happen. So throughout this journey, this pathless path, the consciousness gains relative wisdom and it learns to master these different levels of consciousness. So via individualization, the consciousness matures. And taking an example is that we establish a new relationship to elements. For example, earth element that used to be this maybe tamasic heavy element for us, making us inert. When we establish conscious relationship to it, when Purusha wins over Prakriti, this earth element turns into luminous qualities of patience and endurance, groundedness. And the water element turns into devotion and aspiration instead of desiring everything else all the time in our life. So this is what the path is about for the consciousness, is to learn to operate in these different levels. And this is sutras what describe about this, these very wonderful sutras. So Sutra 16, starting there, says that on attaining the bliss of consciousness, there is permanent perception of oneness with consciousness, even when perceiving the body and so on. This is liberation when alive. So in ultimate sense, this sutra probably refers to something that can be called sahaja samadhi. It's a permanent state of absorption. But this is very rare. It's very, very rare. But how I like to read this and understand this sutra, and I can verify it in my own life, that even before one is permanently abiding, immersed in the non-dual nature, one starts recognizing more and more oneness, more and more. It's already the level of the heart, and the Buddhic level, really we start experiences this juiciness and bliss and love and oneness. And then we notice that we have a physical body and we still see objects in our perception. We are not recognizing the ultimate in its totality yet, but it's a gradual unveiling process that we can start enjoying, and more we are able to tap into the bliss. Even first, it's a little more or less veiled version of it, but we start recognizing that underlying essence. We become very happy. So Sutra 17 says that the bliss of consciousness is revealed through the unfolding of the center. Unfolding of the center. So unfolding the center, the core of consciousness. So we withdraw our attention to the center, to self-awareness. And it's the very nature of self-awareness that shines forth as bliss and love. And then finally, the final sutra. Then for all time, through absorption in the self, whose nature is the power of the great mantra, meaning Om, Aum mantra, and whose essence is the bliss of divine effulgence. which means radiation, bliss of divine radiation, luminosity. One obtains mastery of the wheel of deities, energies that create and withdraw all that is. And this is very precisely what I just mentioned. That these, first of all, different levels of planes of consciousness, different chakras also in many tantric traditions are called as deities. They are expressions and levels of Shakti. That's why they're called goddesses, and they even have names for those. We can talk about also that at least a little bit in the weekend webinar. And so it says that the consciousness starts mastering the wheel of deities, energies. So this is exactly what I meant by we start having a conscious relationship with our elements, with the different qualities, which then turn into spiritual qualities. Because we change our perception of these planes by our own consciousness. And it says that we obtain mastery of the wheel of deities, energies that create and withdraw all that is. It means that this energy aspect, this primordial energy, spanda, vibration, which creates everything, then withdraws everything. So it's an energy aspect of the very same consciousness we have talked about. This is the auspicious state of Shiva. Shiva here with capital letter, and it means the para Shiva, which was the underlying reality or non-dual reality. So this pathless path is that the ground being, that doesn't really change. That's always going to be the same. Immovable, unchangeable. But then we have this aspect of manifestation, which is changing, and our consciousness is creating relationship to these very levels of expression. It is the nature aspect of the very consciousness. But we, as individualized consciousness, kind of find our way back to establish, to recognize this nature, recognize the vibration. Also, the way in our meditation practice is to deep down recognize that our own thoughts, for example, first we have to recognize them as objects so that we find the subjectivity, but then we start actually recognizing, if we pay close attention, that they are nothing but vibration. And actually what is vibration is it's nothing but that primordial vibration. So everything is just part of that divine expression. And this is like the final where we go beyond subjects and objects. We are beyond subjectivity. This is what all the traditions are talking about, the non-dual realization, where then there is no difference anymore between the subject and the objects. But this we practice nevertheless already, while still more or less identified with our bodies. It's very important to know what we are actually doing when we are practicing. It's very helpful to know what our aim is here and what are the means. So, Nirguna Brahman I mentioned, it's that para Brahman without attributes, but then there is also term Saguna Brahman, which is Brahman with attributes, with qualities, meaning the expression part. And our soul is really both. So therefore we are beings of manifestation, and then we are also that ground essence ourselves. So now I could end by saying that there is an amazing secret actually when we start practicing, which we must not forget. We must not only mentally understand it, but start recognizing it, that there is enormous grace to support our practice. Because it's the very nature of the consciousness that wants to wake up. But paradoxically, it needs its own veiled version to want it and show that it wants it. And then implements the knowledge how, and then brings it to the action. So surrender is not about we to surrender to some higher will to do it for us whenever that happens. We have to manifest that higher will through our very action in the personal level. This is what surrender is about. It's so misunderstood often. So Purusha needs to overcome Prakriti, as I mentioned. So in the weekend webinar we will more elaborate this process of Kundalini, awakening related to the path of initiation. Also these planes of consciousness as qualities, as rays. And something that we could call consciousness or anatomy. So we will study the anatomy of consciousness. And we also talk much more about the meditation practice and different styles of practice, because we have to understand, this relates to knowledge, that different styles of meditation also aim different things, and that's why they produce different kinds of fruits. So we may like to implement, at least in the knowledge level and maybe somewhat in experimental level also, different styles to also feel what nourishes our heart. If we are able to make the meditation like the most wonderful, enjoyable thing in our life, then we don't have to have this fight, should I sit down or shouldn't I sit down? Here is good to stop now. And so now we will make a 5 minutes break and then we continue afterwards. So thank you so much for this so far together. We will continue soon.
So, my dear friends, I hope everyone is back from the break. Yeah, we will have a question answer, brief question answer in the end of this lecture. So please save your questions, write them down if you cannot remember. So as you can see and hear, that our beginning point is, well, for those of you who are into Theosophy, you already are well versed in lofty models of this world, this existence. But the other half, in our view, is the practice itself. The fact that lofty information and knowledge, especially knowledge that pertains to the third level, the mind level or the mental level, is not enough. We easily get stuck there. And for most people, they are the realm of existence for them is the lower three levels. They never experience anything higher than that. And so this is very much when the forces of tamas and rajas is predominant. So when we begin to feel a calling for the spirit, spirituality in its essence, rather than in what can be spoken about it, then we need to, well, concretize the teachings. We have to make the words of the teachings living in our lives, so that we live the theory, that the theory becomes practice. There is really no other way, with the exception of very, very few people who may get a spontaneous awakening. But for the most, it is a process, a long process, like Leena also indicated, a long and gradual process which takes that will and determination to pierce the veils that covers the truth hidden within us. And so at some point we have to realize that it is not so much what can be sought, what we can seek for outside of ourselves, but it increasingly becomes comes to our awareness that we need to find it within ourselves, and that requires a steady meditation practice. And so here in our house in Heartland-Sydänmaa, Sydänmaa means heartland in Finnish. We emphasize this aspect very, very much. This is vital, and in fact, because we are predominantly, as human beings, as thinking human beings, we are predominantly motivated from our minds and our emotional nature to act and to do stuff and to be active in the world and do interesting things and fulfill our desires. But it's all, like also Leena indicated, it's all something that takes our attention away from ourselves, rather than withdraw the attention from the physical objects or the manifesting objects, both in the physical and emotional and mental realms. So as I said, that there's really no other way than to sit, like as we say here, to sit with what is, to look deeply within, and to find that all the glory and the beauty and the love that we so much wish for, that we so much are longing for, can be found within us. But if we are not if we don't have will enough, if we don't have knowledge enough, it will be difficult to perform the right action. And so therefore, not only do we need the knowledge to know what to do, we also need the will to do it. And then on top of that, we need support. We need to know that what we are doing is right. So when we begin a deep and genuine meditation practice, many people, most people, they will start blindfolded, not knowing what to do. And so therefore, some guidance is needed, some direction, somebody to point the direction is needed. Otherwise, one can easily get lost in the phenomena that keeps arising. So all this I am saying because we only have short time now, and in the weekend webinar we will go much more into the practical implications of a solid meditation practice. So you will get a better feeling of what it means to have a solid meditation practice. But I don't want you to be intimidated by this. It doesn't mean that you have to, from the beginning, practice for hours, or be very harsh with yourself. No, quite the opposite. We really are emphasizing here to take an approach where we try to understand ourselves. We try to understand the motivations that moves us. So we don't want to suppress anything. We don't want to negate anything, push it away and forget about it. This is very much the old style of spiritual practice. But Kashmir Shaivism, for example, is a tantric tradition, which means the practice of tantra means to integrate everything, to make anything that is dual, anything that has opposition, to make that one and whole, so that you have opposite forces. You have good and bad. The tantric practitioner will bridge the good and the bad, rather than pushing the bad away and say, ooh, it's bad and I don't want it. Rather, we acknowledge it. We see it. It is also a part of the expression of the divine. And so that's also a sin, to push that away. If we have to use this old-fashioned language, to be a sinner, to be focused on your desires, for example, then you're sinful. No, the tantric practitioner would not say that. There's nothing that is not sacred. And there's nothing that cannot be integrated into your beingness, into your completeness. And so, beginning a spiritual practice, beginning a meditative practice means to integrate all that which created separateness in us. All that creates conflict in us. So why don't we make a short meditation just to give you a little bit of flavor of what I'm talking about. So begin by making yourself comfortable. Maybe you're sitting on a chair, maybe you're sitting on a pillow. If you're sitting in a sofa or armchair, I suggest that you sit, well, the best is to have a straight back, an erect spine, so that you signaling with your body that you are alert, you are awake, and you are present. So begin by becoming aware of your body. This body is not merely some inconvenient thing that has certain qualities that you are not particularly happy about. This body of yours is a divine creation. And without it, you would not be here. So let us begin by giving thanks to the physical body. And if you can feel it, feel a gratitude, a feeling of gratitude towards your body. It serves you every day. It does every command that you give it. Feel how the body relaxes. And as you send feelings of gratitude and thankfulness, your body simply relaxes. And yet you maintain the posture. You maintain the willful, purposeful posture of sitting. Feel how you can begin to relax so that all the cells in your body, all your muscles are relaxing. And feel your body as a whole. Feel how the weight of your body is pressing you down. All the kilos of your body is pushed onto the pillow or the seat that you're sitting on. You're solidifying your presence. At the same time, be aware right now that you are aware. This awareness is not related to your body as such. Not in the situation when you are passively sitting, quietly sitting. Your awareness is something entirely different. You are not your body, but you have a body. So if you have a body, then who are you? You are the awareness. Now you may experience thoughts and movement in the mind, restlessness. You may be asking yourself what to be aware of. I am awareness, what to be aware of. Try to be aware of just the awareness itself. experience that this is difficult to maintain awareness of the awareness, because the mind is restless. Because the mind wants to move. This is okay. You are not failing. You are practicing. I want you to move your attention to your chest, to your heart center. And try to, in your inner vision, to visualize the picture you have been looking at here with the 7 levels. And visualize that dot in the middle, the heart, the point that bridges the pure awareness with the manifest realm. I'm not asking you to bridge that full gap, but with your own capability to embrace and to feel compassion for your own body. Let this quality of love pouring from your heart contain your entire body, mind, your entire being. That you are contained within your heart. And within the containment of your heart, you are able to love your manifestation, your body, as well as your mind. Your thinking mind. Let yourself feel complete and whole. Nothing must be left outside of the reaches of your heart. Now, our meditation is ending. Give thanks. Give your heartfelt thanks to your vehicles, the physical body, emotional body, mental body, all this that is in use every day without second thought. And these bodies are an expression of the Divine Mother, Shakti. Vimarsha. And as such, your bodies are a pure expression of that divine presence. And when you honor that deeply, you begin to express those divine qualities. Now you can externalize your awareness, and when you're ready, open your eyes. The meditation has ended. Now normally we do much longer meditations when we have our weekend courses, so we have much better chance to absorb and practice to absorb ourselves in our deeper nature.
So we have some little time left. You're very welcome to, and we very much encourage you to ask questions, and you can also comment on this lecture or meditation, or did you get nourishing to your heart, or did you understand, and how do you, just shortly if you want to share, but also if you want to ask something that wasn't maybe so clear. And you will get this recording afterwards, so you can also look it again. There was a lot of stuff packed in in one lecture here, but you are always welcome to go back to it. Very much encourage you to, if you want to, ask. And there's no obligations for that, but to share something.
Well, we have to specify that those who signed up for this webinar can receive a link to the recording.
yeah.
But those who didn't sign up but have appeared from Facebook, we don't have your email, so therefore we cannot.
Okay, those who signed up. Yeah. Anyway.
But you can send us an email if you want it.
Yes. I would like to ask you, where did you find that tradition?
Kashmir Shaivism, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. How did you find that? And I'm not sure I really understand how different it is to the Theosophy.
So it's not very different because Theosophy is also based on all these Asian traditions. Theosophy kind of brings together different traditions. So it's not very different, but what I meant is just that for me it has given some more precise hints maybe, but I'm not so familiar with the Theosophy as you may be. So we have studied different traditions, but how to find, it's like the life is just guiding us, and Kashmir Shaivism probably originally, maybe even Mark Sullivan has mentioned it several years ago, and but there is a lot of available material if you're also interested to study it in internet. Something that is called Lakshman Jew Academy. Lakshman Jew is a Kashmir Shaivism master who has passed away only in 1991, so he's a kind of a contemporary teacher. And so, his followers have made a very nice also webpage, but his books, his one of the major work, The Secret Supreme, is a really like laying out all this cosmology. And but actually this Kashmir Shaivism has been very much in our system always, because I remember already when I was teaching with Aske Lorentzen in the Golden Academy, I always used these terms of Shiva and Shakti. We have both been very much accustomed this language from within, that it somehow appeals us. And we are not only limited our studies to this tradition. We didn't introduce much our background because we sent this introductory video that you can all see. We are a little bit telling about our background and what we are studying and what we're doing. But Kashmir Shaivism is just one tradition. But since it's somehow, I wanted to now in this particular lecture just to explain these sutras. It's not like we are only teaching this. We are also dwelling from Hinduism, different traditions, and Buddhism. And also Theosophy is our kind of a route where we started with, also with Aske Lorentzen, and very much have had love in our hearts for also for Theosophical masters and very much interest. So we see that exactly like you say, the point is not that it should be different. The point is that we are seeking the same essence from different traditions and then bringing together and refining our understanding.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for your
Thank you.
sharing. Thanks. Nice that you are with us.
There's a question there. Can you go too fast on a spiritual path of development so that it becomes unhealthy?
Well, we can both say maybe something about that, but yeah, you can start if you like.
Yes, of course there's a possibility that you may feel that something goes too quick and it appears to become unhealthy. But when we actually are on a path where it becomes a little bit unhealthy, I don't know what you exactly mean by unhealthy, but let's just say that our mind could be unstable, for example. Temporarily, we could become unstable. Yes, you are saying, yeah. So basically we can look at it from the karmic viewpoint, and that is that our desires and our aspirations from previous lives are also affecting this life. And so both the aspirations and desires that we have come into this life with from previous lives can fuel a certain development and a certain speed of that development. But also the desires and aspirations of this life has an impact on an unhealthy development. But what I mean with the karmic relationship to past lives, meaning that you have a sudden awakening and it comes out of the blue and you don't know what's going on and you're temporarily perhaps a little mentally unstable. And of course that's not a desirable development. We would want to preferably have a more harmonious growth, but it's not always possible. So sometimes we just have to take the bittersweet pill, take the medicine that comes, and see that in the end it has a purpose.
But it also very much depends on the style of your practice. Like what we are doing here in the Heartland, we very much emphasize the integrating the spiritual awareness into daily life. So when you practice in the style of embracing everything that you have, rather than using meditation maybe even as a tool to escape this world to some higher realm where you can kind of forget your problems. So it depends very much on the style, I would say. If it seems like it goes too fast or if it becomes unbalanced. So balanced spirituality is very much when you use love very much as your, and groundedness as your tools of your practice. And you say, so shall one do so if go too fast? So what shall one do if it goes so fast? So it depends now what you exactly mean by that, but if you feel like unstable somehow, it's a very good is to ground, to do meditations that are grounding you, that you exactly the kind of meditation, for example, Hans Christian was now guiding. We will also in the webinar teach very different styles of meditation. To each of us has a particular leaning, but when we emphasize a lot of physical presence and when we emphasize compassion and embracing our personality, then also our experiences that it goes too fast, they start calming down. So when we are able to also recognize our fear, so where usually why it feels like it goes too fast is because our perception is changing somehow. We feel like we are losing the ground and it raises up fears. So when we are learning to recognize those fears and really looking gently our fears and our personality, we are very much calming the process. And it doesn't stop the process, but it kind of integrates your spiritual development.
And this also often relates to a long-term healing of the emotional body in particular, but of course also the mental body. But often we have subconscious material that has not been processed yet, and we cannot see it, we don't know it's there, therefore it is subconscious. And so as we embark on a spiritual path and we do spiritual practice, the subconscious material will gradually lift itself up. It will be pulled up from the darkness into the light. And in some cases, it can feel like there's been pulled up too much. And so this can be, like Leena also points out, that greatly embraced and reduced when we, rather than trying to ascend, but trying to integrate our spiritual realization, our spiritual aspirations, that they become manifest in your physical life, rather than your spirituality is something that lives in your head or in your heart, but it doesn't really relate to the physical level. This is when it goes wrong, or it can go wrong.
So Patrick is here commenting that thanks for inviting us to your home. So thanks for Patrick also to be there with us. I have heard about Patrick from Hans Christian.
Yep.
Good things.
Yeah.
That you're so nice. That we haven't met yet. So is there any final question before we end for tonight?
Yeah. And of course, you're welcome to join the weekend webinar where we can go much deeper in with all this. But a final question
Or comment?
or comment? Thank you.
Thank you, Lilian. Thank you for lecture and meditation. So thank you too. And good to, I didn't see Lilian, but if it's the same Lilian, we know I always have Lilian.
There was a couple of Lilians.
In my heart, because we know her very well. And once more, thanks to Liz also. Nice to see you. And
Yeah, Liz, thank you for the invitation.
Also, thank you for all our own group from Finland that you wanted to join, even this English speaking lecture we are often giving. We are teaching in Finnish and Hans Christian teaches in English, but we have a luxury also that we usually even translate those into Finnish, except the webinars. But it has been wonderful to see you all and feel you all.
And wonderful to integrate the Danish and the Finnish in one group. Wonderful.
So, pieces of the puzzles come together. You're from Denmark, I'm from Finland, and that's how it goes. Okay, but so lots of love and awareness, and stay in the heart.
Yeah,
all of you. And all these times also, we have this crisis going on in the planet, and now there is calling very much for all of us to be awake and remain awake, and try to remember that we do have this compassion already. We should not forget it into our daily activities and hassling of the mind. We also here very much in the Heartland connected to this idea of the path of the Christ or Bodhisattva path, where we want to practice so that it benefits all living beings, and we want to remember to be the source of the grace for others. Even when we are imperfect, we can still do that. All of us can do that. It's a wonderful gift from our divine consciousness. Now it's time to stop, even 8 minutes more than we're supposed to. So let's just end by just being 30 more seconds consciously in our hearts. And we give thanks to these amazing teachings brought by different lineages and masters. Kashmir Shaivism being only one, and Theosophy another amazing system that helps us so much in the path to point us where to go, what to do. And we thank for the living presence of all these sources of grace, masters and amazing beings who are supporting our practice every day, every moment. We are never alone, even when it sometimes feels maybe so. We're constantly being watched over and supported. Now sleep well and tight when you go to bed, and hope to see you one day again.
Yeah.
With many, of course, we will see anyway, soon.
May the grace be with you.